We're counting down 15 Christmas traditions from the 1960s and 70s that vanished completely. From communal high street spectacles and crafty homemade decorations to rituals that once defined a generation, each entry reveals how British families celebrated the festive season in ways seldom seen today. Some disappeared quietly with changing fashions, others faded as supermarkets, technology, and new safety concerns reshaped the holiday landscape. Which beloved custom claimed the most iconic spot? And what small moments of nostalgia will surprise you along the way? Let's begin our countdown with a tradition that turned every December shopping trip into pure theatrical magic. Number 15. Number 15. Department store pantomime matinees and window grottos turned city shopping into a December spectacle. In Liverpool and Manchester, Lewis's staged full pantomimes, Cinderella, Aladdin, drawing hundreds of children for weekday matinees, tickets clutched tight, parents relieved to rest weary feet. Harrods and Selfridges in London followed suit, their event spaces echoing with laughter and the shrill of tin whistles handed out as souvenirs. Animated window displays unveiled in late November, mechanical elves, polar bears, and swirling snow became appointment viewing, crowds pressing against frosted glass while carols played on loop. Local newspapers listed showtimes and window launch evenings, marking the start of the season as surely as the first frost. For many, these outings offered a rare taste of live theatre, a brush with magic before the family tree went up at home. By the late 1970s, as retail moved to the suburbs and multiplexes claimed the crowds, the matinee tradition faded, leaving behind only yellowing playbills and half-remembered songs. Yet for those who queued in the cold, the memory lingers, a time when the high street itself starred in the Christmas story. Number 14. The curbside Christmas tree stall brought the scent of pine and the bustle of trade to British streets each December. Vendors arrived before dawn, unloading fresh-cut spruces from battered vans, their hands rough from rope and resin. Council permits hung from lapels or stall posts, a mark of legitimacy in a trade that thrived on trust and local reputation. Buyers haggled over fullness, pointing out bald patches, prodding trunks, while handwritten price tags flapped in the wind. 7 shillings for a modest tree in 1965, rising to £4 by the mid-70s, though regulars might bargain for a holly sprig or a better deal as Christmas Eve drew near. Families debated their choice, children circling the display, parents testing weight and freshness, eyeing burlap wraps that promised roots still damp from the forest. The journey home became a ritual in itself. Trees balanced on prams, strapped to bicycle crossbars, or carried between two siblings along terraced streets. These markets faded as garden centers and supermarkets offered pre-netted, uniform trees with longer hours and less fuss. Yet in memory, it is the street seller's call and the sharp, living aroma of pine that signal the true beginning of Christmas. Number 13. The aluminium Christmas tree shimmered into British homes at the height of the space age, promising a future where even tradition would sparkle with modernity. Brushed silver branches, spun from lightweight metal, caught the glow of revolving color wheels. Lamps that bathed the tree in shifting pools of red, green, blue, and gold. For a brief window in the late 1960s, these trees stood as the ultimate statement of modern taste, their geometric symmetry and metallic sheen reflecting the optimism of the era. Catalogues from 1967 boasted of no needles to sweep up, while design magazines praised their clean lines and futuristic glamour. Children watched mesmerized as the entire tree cycled through a rainbow, the living room transformed into a scene from tomorrow's world. Yet the fashion faded almost as quickly as it arrived. By the early 1970s, families quietly packed away their aluminium trees, returning to the scent and mess of real pine. The color wheels flickered out, relics of a moment when Christmas tried on the future, briefly, brilliantly, before the world moved on. Number 12. The school nativity play and classroom party once stood as December's main event for children across Britain. Every pupil found a role: angel, shepherd, star, or innkeeper, no matter how crowded the cast, with teachers scribbling names onto homemade scripts and assigning parts weeks in advance. Costumes emerged from the backs of cupboards and the ingenuity of mothers and grandmothers. Old bedsheets dyed with tea for shepherds, tinsel halos wired from last year's decorations, cardboard crowns painted with leftover gold. Parent volunteers stitched, pinned, and sometimes sewed entire outfits by hand, their efforts recorded in teacher logbooks and PTA notes preserved in school archives. The classroom itself transformed. Crepe paper streamers, paper snowflakes taped to windows, and tables groaning with homemade fairy cakes and sausage rolls, each treat carefully counted to make sure every child received one. In the final week, lessons gave way to rehearsals and party games, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of paste from paper crafts. Letters from the era describe the thrill of standing on stage, parents packed onto benches, flashes from box cameras capturing nervous smiles. By the late 1970s, tightening curricula and new health and safety rules began to squeeze out these rituals, replacing them with more structured, less communal celebrations. Yet for a generation, the memory of a whole class singing "Away in a Manger," costumes slipping, voices trembling, remains a small stage drama where every child starred. Number 11. Christmas television variety specials once stitched together. The nation's living rooms with a single thread of laughter and spectacle. In the era of just 2 or 3 channels, the holiday broadcast schedule became an event in itself, circled in the radio times weeks ahead, debated in playgrounds and office canteens alike. Families clustered around the set, plates of mince pies balanced on knees, as Morecambe and Wise, the 2 Ronnies, or Val Doonican, delivered sketches and musical numbers crafted for maximum festive cheer. Audience figures soared. BARB ratings from the early 1970s record over 20 million viewers tuning in for Christmas Night with the Stars, a figure unimaginable in today's fragmented media world. The next day, scenes from the previous evening's show became instant currency. Children mimicked catchphrases in the street, while adults dissected punchlines over Boxing Day leftovers. For one night, the country laughed and gasped together, a fleeting unity built from shared appointment viewing. Yet as video recorders, satellite channels, and on-demand programming crept in, the ritual of gathering for a single broadcast faded. What endures is the memory of a time when everyone knew what was on, and the Christmas special was more than entertainment. It was a national gathering, replayed in stories long after the credits rolled. Number 10. The Christmas of 1973 arrived beneath the shadow of the 3-day week, when the nation's lights dimmed and families faced a holiday shaped by rationed power. Rotating blackouts swept through December, plunging whole streets into darkness with little warning. Housewives planned dinners by torchlight, while fathers checked the radio for the latest outage schedule. Kitchens echoed with the hiss of camping stoves and the click of matches as roast potatoes browned in borrowed ovens or on borrowed time. Children learned to eat by candlelight, their faces flickering in the gloom, while mothers wrapped hot bricks in towels to keep puddings warm. Oral histories recall neighbors stringing extension leads between terraced houses, sharing sockets and ovens in a spirit of quiet defiance. In some flats, Sunday school halls opened their kitchens, inviting anyone with a raw bird or a cold pie to make use of the heat before the next blackout. The hum of community deepened, recipes were swapped, spare candles shared, and the hardship of the moment softened by laughter and collective thrift. Newsreel footage from that winter captures families clustered around paraffin heaters, the glow of a single lantern illuminating mince pies and mugs of stewed tea. The crisis lasted only a season, but its memory lingers as proof that, even when the lights went out, Christmas found a way to shine. Improvised, communal, and marked by a resilience that turned scarcity into celebration. Number 9. Local Christmas savings clubs once anchored. The festive hopes of working-class Britain, their ledgers thick with the names and pennies of neighbours bound by trust. Each January, the ritual began anew. Members slipped a shilling or two across the bar of the local pub, the counter at the corner shop, or the pay office at the factory, each coin entered in careful columns by a trusted treasurer. By December, those modest weekly deposits, often no more than a few bob, had swollen into lump sums of £50 or even £100, enough to transform a bare Christmas into one of abundance. Payout day brought its own drama. In smoky back rooms and tiled public bars, treasurers unlocked battered tin boxes and counted out crisp notes and coins, watched by a circle of anxious faces. For many, this was the only way to afford a turkey from the butcher, a new toy from Woolworths, or tinsel for the tree. The club's ledger was more than a financial record. It was a register of community faith, each signature a small act of mutual reliance. Yet the system ran on personal honor, and when a treasurer absconded or the sums failed to add up, the loss struck deep. Christmas dreams dashed, trust broken, headlines splashed across the local paper. Still, for decades, these clubs offered security and anticipation, a slow build of excitement as December approached. Their decline began with the rise of bank accounts, building societies, and the first credit cards, impersonal, efficient, but lacking the warmth of a payout shared among friends. The memory lingers in stories of careful saving and the thrill of a December windfall, when thrift and community made Christmas possible for those who might otherwise have gone without. 8th place, real candles on Christmas trees flickered with a beauty that belonged to another age, a tradition borrowed from Victorian parlours, stubbornly clinging on in British homes through the 1960s. Clip-on brass holders, each cradling a slender white taper, were fixed to the tips of fir branches, their flames dancing in the drafts of chilly living rooms. Mothers lit the candles only for a few minutes on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, the family standing by in quiet awe, buckets of water and sand kept at the ready just in case. In some households, children were sent to fetch extra towels and reminded to keep well back, the air thick with caution and anticipation. London Fire Brigade reports from the late 60s recorded dozens of seasonal fires linked to candles and decorations, anxieties that grew with every headline about tragedy striking at the heart of Christmas. Insurance companies began to take notice, inserting stern warnings into policy leaflets and, in rare cases, refusing cover where open flames were part of the festive display. By 1972, safety campaigns filled newspapers and radio slots, urging families to trade romance for reliability. The shift was swift. Electric fairy lights, affordable at Woolworths and promised as safe, replaced the old ritual almost overnight. Yet for those who remember, the memory of a tree lit by real candlelight, its fragile glow, its hush of collective hope and fear, remains unmatched. A vanished moment where beauty and danger burned side by side. Number 7. Boxing Day bubble and squeak brought the sound of sizzling leftovers to British kitchens, extending the Christmas feast into a second-day ritual. Housewives stood at enamel pans, slicing cold roast potatoes, sprouts, and carrots into rough coins, their hands moving by memory rather than recipe. The name itself echoed through kitchens. Bubble for the gentle hiss as vegetables fried, squeak for the odd, high sound escaping from the pan. Children hovered, noses wrinkling at the cabbage, but drawn by the promise of crispy bits and the tang of brown sauce. Cold turkey, carved thin and served alongside, made the meal feel like a reward for thrift, not a punishment for excess. In some homes, sharp pickled onions or beetroot cut through the richness, a habit rooted in regional tastes and the practical need to clear the larder before New Year. Post-war cookbooks offered advice on stretching a roast, but oral histories remember bubble and squeak as more than economy. It was a lesson passed down. Nothing wasted, every scrap valued, a mindset shaped by rationing that lingered long after the coupons disappeared. The sizzling pan became a Boxing Day soundtrack, as familiar as carols or the clatter of board games. Yet as ready meals and smaller families changed the scale of Christmas, the ritual faded, replaced by shopping trips or reheated convenience. Still, for those who remember, the scent of frying potatoes and cabbage on a cold December morning means Christmas isn't quite over, a final taste of celebration, humble and heartening. Number 6. Homemade paper chains brought classrooms and kitchens alive with the scent of flour and water paste, and the gentle chaos of children's hands at work. December afternoons in primary schools became a blur of colored paper strips, scissors snipping, and sticky fingers pressing loops into long, fluttering garlands. Teachers, armed with tubs of paste and a patience born of experience, set entire classes to the task, each table competing to craft the longest chain, stretching them across chalkboards and assembly halls, the length a matter of class pride. School photos from the era capture rows of children grinning behind their handiwork, some chains trailing out of frame, their colors a patchwork of whatever paper could be found. At home, the ritual continued around kitchen tables, newspapers spread to catch drips, parents and siblings joining in, laughter mixing with the slap of paste and the rustle of drying links. In some families, resourcefulness meant cutting strips from old magazines or wallpaper samples, each link a memory of another season. By the mid-1970s, foil garlands and factory-made decorations edged out the homemade, promising shine without the mess or effort. Yet for those who remember, no shop-bought tinsel could match the satisfaction of a chain built by hand. Each loop a small act of togetherness, each sticky thumbprint a mark of Christmas made, not bought. Number 5. Woolworths. Christmas decorations transformed the high street into a glittering destination, drawing families through swinging doors each December with the promise of affordable magic. Counters groaned under the weight of baubles, glass at first, then plastic, each shining under fluorescent lights. Sold for a penny apiece, a price that put festive sparkle within reach of nearly every household. By 1939, Woolworths had shifted 500 million ornaments worldwide, a figure that dwarfed any rival and set the tone for Christmas on both sides of the Atlantic. Buyers in Britain sourced from Lauscher's famed German factories, negotiating shipments via Hull and Liverpool docks, so that even in the depths of winter, the shelves sparkled with imported glass and tinsel. Company catalogues and internal memos dictated the choreography of display: artificial pines decked with foil garlands, honeycomb bells, and boxed sets of shatterproof baubles from Hong Kong, each item arranged to catch the eye and loosen purse strings. Staff recalled the annual rush, district managers inspecting displays, children begging for candy canes, parents calculating what the sixpence could stretch to this year. The ritual of choosing decorations became a family outing, a small act of aspiration and belonging. As supermarkets and DIY stores muscled in during the late 70s, the monopoly faded. But for decades, Woolworths was Christmas. Its aisles a stage for the season's first excitement, its bargains the reason even modest homes glittered like the grandest parlors. Number 4. Blue Peter Advent crowns lit up the December weeks in homes across Britain. their wire frames and flickering candles a direct echo of Thursday afternoons spent in front of the television. The tradition began in 1964, when BBC producers challenged presenters to build a festive wreath from nothing more than coat hangers, tinsel, and a handful of candles, materials found in almost any household. Each week, a new candle was added, the count climbing as Christmas approached, and children watched with breath held for that moment when flame met evergreen. Yet behind the scenes, a quiet tension simmered. Studio lights dried out the greenery, and fire extinguishers waited just out of shot, ready for the smallest wisp of smoke. Anecdotes from the archives tell of scorched ribbons and singed fingertips, presenters learning to strike matches with trembling hands, while producers rehearsed evacuation routes. Letters poured in from parents, some praising the ritual for teaching patience and anticipation, others worrying about the risk of open flames in small hands. By the mid-1970s, safety campaigns and a string of high-profile house fires shifted the mood. The BBC quietly retired the segment, and schools followed suit, trading wire and wax for factory-made advent calendars. Yet for those who remember the ritual, the scent of pine, the glow of candlelight, the thrill of seeing something built on screen come alive on the kitchen table, the Blue Peter Advent crown remains a vanished marvel, a moment when television shaped not just what children watched, but what they did together, week by week, until Christmas finally arrived. Number 3, the Christmas Eve turkey queue at the local butcher stood as the season's most public rite of anticipation. Before dawn, lines formed along terraced streets, mothers wrapped in scarves, children stamping cold feet, neighbors trading whispered forecasts about who would get the best bird this year. The butcher's window was a gallery of promise. Turkeys and geese hung by their feet, skin tinged blue from the chill, each tagged with a name scribbled on a paper slip weeks before. Inside, sawdust muffled the shuffle of boots, and the air thickened with the scent of raw poultry and trailing hints of sage and pork from the sausage counter. Butchers, faces flushed from the cold and the clatter of early knives, called out names in turn, sometimes offering a bird a pound heavier than ordered, sometimes apologizing for a smaller size, always with the practiced diplomacy of men who knew Christmas dinner depended on their hands. Coins, saved and counted since summer, changed hands across the counter. Some customers insisted on inspecting the giblets, others accepted whatever was handed over, their relief plain as they bundled the heavy parcel in brown paper and hurried home. The queue outside, meanwhile, became its own gathering, a place for gossip, recipe tips, and the annual tally of who had been lucky or left to settle for a capon or chicken. In industrial towns, the line might snake around the block, laughter and the odd grumble rising as the morning wore on. Market towns saw a more relaxed ritual, but the tension was universal. Would there be enough to go round, or would the last family leave empty-handed? The sensory theatre, frosty breath, the slap of sawdust, the butcher's banter, marked the true beginning of Christmas for many. Yet this tradition faded with the arrival of home freezers and supermarket birds, the slow vanishing of independent butchers from the high street. For those who remember it, the turkey queue was more than a chore. It was a communal performance, a shared weight that turned the prospect of plenty into a public celebration. Number 2, the Queen's speech once marked the still point in the swirl of a British Christmas day. At precisely 3 o'clock, families arranged themselves in living rooms across the country, children cross-legged on the carpet, adults settled into armchairs, cups of tea cooling on side tables. The house, which had bustled since dawn with the rituals of presents and roast dinners, fell quiet as the familiar opening music signaled the monarch's address. For millions, this was not just a broadcast, but an anchor. BBC audience research from the late 1960s records that up to 70% of households tuned in, a figure that dwarfs any modern appointment viewing. The transition to color television in 1967 lent a new richness to the spectacle, with the Queen's crimson robes and golden decorations shining brighter than ever before. Families with brand new color sets invited neighbors to witness the moment, the gathering itself becoming part of the day's choreography. Schedules bent around the speech, dinner delayed or hastened, walks timed to finish just before the clock struck 3. Letters preserved in BBC archives describe the sense of unity, a nation pausing together, even as snow fell in Aberdeen and rain lashed Plymouth. Children fidgeted, some listening intently, others daydreaming, while parents nodded at familiar phrases of hope and gratitude. The spell lasted barely 10 minutes, yet its effect lingered. Conversation resumed, games were unpacked, but the sense of occasion remained. In later years, as video recorders and multiple channels loosened the hold of shared schedules, the ritual faded. But in its heyday, the Queen's speech was more than a broadcast. It was the moment Christmas gathered itself, quiet, dignified, and unmistakably British. And finally, in first place, the formal multi-generational Christmas Day ritual stands as the vanished heart of 20th century British Christmas. The day began with a hush of anticipation, children waking early but forbidden to burst into the parlor until every adult was dressed, collars starched, hair brushed, shoes polished even for the youngest. Grandparents arrived mid-morning, coats dusted with frost, bearing tins of shortbread or a bottle of sherry, their entrance marking the true start of festivities. Each household followed a choreography so precise it seemed inherited. Presents exchanged only after tea and toast, the youngest appointed to distribute parcels, elders watching from armchairs as paper drifted to the floor. The midday meal was a solemn affair, table set with best linen, silver polished the night before, and every seat assigned by age and kinship. Even those who protested at formality found themselves in borrowed jackets or Sunday dresses, the expectation of respect woven into every detail. The designated carver, almost always the father or grandfather, stood at the head of the table, knife poised, as conversation fell silent for the first slice of turkey. Diaries from the era record the pride and nerves of this role, the gentle teasing if a slice fell ragged or a wishbone snapped too soon. Children recited lines of grace learned at school, their voices trembling with the weight of the moment, while mothers cast quick glances to ensure every plate was served before sitting down themselves. After dinner, the ritual moved from home to home, a round of visits to aunts, neighbors, or the local vicar, each stop governed by an unspoken timetable. Shoes were changed, coats buttoned, and gifts exchanged in person, never by post. Evenings brought parlor games and the Queen's speech, the family gathering once more in the front room, younger children nodding off on Grandad's lap as the day's order gradually loosened into laughter and song. Letters and family diaries recall the comfort of these routines, the sense that, for one day, everyone knew their part and belonged to something larger than themselves. This formal choreography faded as families scattered, dress codes relaxed, and visits gave way to phone calls or later video screens. Yet for those who lived it, the memory endures. The warmth of a crowded room, the pride in a well-set table, the certainty that, for one day each year, the generations moved as one. In the end, it was not the meal or the gifts that defined Christmas, but the ritual itself. A vanished script that once bound families together, quietly, completely. From department store pantomimes to the formal multi-generational Christmas Day ritual, our countdown of 15 vanished traditions reveals how British Christmases of the 1960s and 70s were shaped by community, thrift, and shared anticipation. The most striking entries, like real candles flickering on evergreen branches, early morning turkey queues, and communal savings clubs, highlight an era defined by hands-on celebration and neighborhood connection. Across all entries, certain patterns emerge. Each tradition anchored families in seasonal rhythms, whether through the creative bustle of homemade paper chains, the communal spectacle of Woolworth's decorations, or the national pause for the Queen's speech. What made these traditions qualify was their prevalence, emotional resonance, and the fact that they have disappeared almost completely from today's Christmas landscape. This list shows that while the rituals themselves may have faded, their warmth and sense of togetherness continue to inspire. In every case, these customs were more than seasonal habits. They were the threads that wove generations together, leaving behind a legacy still felt in the spirit of Christmas across Britain.